You're listening to Citizens AM, KCAM Digital Radio. Digital Radio.
Sorry about that, folks. I had forgotten to turn my mic on. It's been about a month since we've been away, so bear with me just a bit. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, it is high time that we shed some light on a pervasive malaise that haunts our contemporary society. A threefold menace, if you will, that is subtly eating away at the foundational bedrock of our communities. This is the frightening specter of mass manipulation. A demon fed by a consistent diet of propaganda and embedded by the increasingly prevalent politics of hate. Imagine our world, if you will, as a vast canvas, splashed with vibrant hues and shades representing distinct perspectives, individual viewpoints born out of diverse life experiences. It's a beautiful mosaic that should ideally symbolize our collective strength, enhancing our adaptability, resilience, and propensity for innovation. But in a rather ironic twist of fate, it's this colorful tapestry that's being systematically ripped apart, thread by thread, by the malevolent hands of manipulation and propaganda. Now, the term mass manipulation isn't as complex as it might sound. It simply refers to the distortion of a collective thought, the phenomenon that we've witnessed that pervades political spheres and election cycles worldwide. Elections should ideally pivot around sound policy debates, logical deliberation, and a retrospective glance at the performance of political candidates. Yet, we see them swayed by fear, suspicion, and blatant falsehoods. And it's not just a dishonest act. It's a profoundly destructive one that undermines the very essence of democracy. It fosters hostility, and it decays our trust in our social institutions. And the favorite weapon of mass manipulation? You guessed it, propaganda. A crafty tool deployed to steer the public toward a particular belief system through the propagation of selectively chosen, often skewed information, or at times barefaced lies. It operates using 5 key principles. The first is the rule of simplification, which simply means using uncomplicated topics to identify and target a mutual enemy. The second is a rule of thickening and disfigurement, or in simple terms, the exaggeration of facts. The third is the rule of orchestration, which is deeply instilling the propagandized messages by repeating them relentlessly in a variety of ways and combinations, and by adapting the messages so that they will appeal to distinct target demographics. And fourth, we have the rule of transfusion, which means using an individual's own prejudices to attack and change their current belief system. And finally, we have the rule of unanimity and contagion, meaning to appeal to the audience's innate desire toward conformism by convincing them that a belief is widely agreed upon and unanimously upheld by the other members of their social group. In essence, propaganda conceals itself beneath a veneer of news and factual reporting. Its actual aim is the indoctrination of society with specific ideologies or viewpoints. It's a careful orchestration and relentless repetition of divisive narratives can lead to the acceptance of manufactured realities, distorting perceptions, and replacing truth with quote-unquote alternative facts, and suppressing or maligning dissenting voices. The menacing offspring of this potent combination of manipulation and propaganda is, of course, the politics of hate. It's a pernicious force that thrives on division, manipulating our fears and prejudices to create scapegoats and incite resentment, shattering communities and ripping apart the fabric of our society. This strategy amplifies the us versus them mentality, breeding an atmosphere of fear and distrust and providing fertile ground for the politics of hate, a most dangerous game that capitalizes on division and conflict. Hate politics has deep and pervasive roots in American history, unfortunately, and the occurrences are so blended and blurred that it's difficult to create an accurate timeline from the many examples. This travesty began with the European colonizers who oppressed and beat down the existing native populations out of fear and lack of desire to understand and embrace societal differences. The ruling power class brought African people to the United States to work their fields and then invited Asian immigrants to our country to build our railroads. then proceeded to use tactics of cultural hate to marginalize the outsiders and control voters by maximizing on their fears. And the direction of these political hate strategies is by no means limited to citizens with a different color skin or outlying religious systems. It's hard to find a more mainstream group than people who are white-skinned and Catholic, yet in the 19th century America, an influx of Irish immigrants brought out a new wave of distrust and discrimination, resulting in massive political upheaval. Today, this manipulation seeks to deepen rifts not only along racial and religious lines, but also in matters of sexuality and gender identity. The societal impact of hate politics is catastrophic. It fractures society along arbitrary lines such as race, religion, or ideology, normalizing fear and hatred while marginalizing empathy and mutual respect. It corrodes our collective ability to address common challenges such as poverty, inequality, and climate change. It stalls constructive dialogue and respectful disagreement, essential components of a healthy democracy. Friends, we are losing our ability to engage in constructive dialogue, to debate ideas respectfully, and to accept that disagreement is an inherent part of a healthy and democratic society. Instead, we have become entrenched in echo chambers that amplify our own views, surrounding ourselves with voices that reinforce our viewpoints and demonize those of others. And sadly, this is a core objective of those who use politics of hate to their best advantage, obscuring the real issues and diverting public attention away from the systemic problems that require resolution. Those in power secure their power by fostering a hostile political climate where collaboration is all but impossible and progress stagnates. The acceleration of technological advancements and digital media has magnified the reach and intensity of misinformation and partial truths, turning propaganda into a relentless 24/7 onslaught. While the benefits of digital media are manifold, it has also amplified the voices of those who seek to manipulate and divide, leading to a state of chronic conflict and hyperpartisanship. Now, folks, let's be honest. Though some may act more responsibly than others, no ruling regime, political party, or ideology is immune from the lure of influencing others' viewpoints through tactics that are, well, less than virtuous. As we dissect these concerns, it's crucial to acknowledge one particular group that employs the tools of propaganda with alarming vigor: the right-wing extremist. There's a fine line at times between persuasion and manipulation, and some dip their toe over that line or even cross it unintentionally. But now I'd like to converse for just a few moments about a particular group that employs dangerous tools of propaganda as blatantly as the Nazi Party. I speak of the growing specter of right-wing extremism and the peril it poses to our democratic institutions and our diverse societies. The rapid ascent into the mainstream discourse and the subsequent threat they pose to our democratic institutions and diverse societies, well, I think we can all agree that's deeply concerning. Now, right-wing extremism is not a new phenomenon. However, the rapidity of its spread and the depths of its penetration into mainstream discourse in recent years, I think we can all find profoundly concerning. Today's extremists are no longer confined to the fringe. They are increasingly visible in the mainstream political parties, media outlets, and even amongst those who hold high office. The menace of right-wing extremism resides in this deceptive appeal. Right-wing extremism often positions itself as the guardian of tradition and national identity, the defender against perceived threats. But beneath the surface lurks a dangerous blend of racism, xenophobia, and authoritarianism, which again amplifies divisions and turns citizens against each other. In its most extreme form, it advocates for the exclusion or suppression of certain groups based on race, religion, or nationality, creating a toxic atmosphere of hostility and hate, destabilizing societies and inciting violence. Moreover, it undermines the democratic principles that form the bedrock of our societies, often seeking to undermine the rule of law, control the media, and restrict individual liberties. History has shown us the tragic consequences of such blatant ideologies, and again, sadly, we are witnessing their resurgence today in the form of hate crimes, terrorist attacks, and political violence, not just in America, but across the world. But we must remember that right-wing extremism is symptomatic of deeper societal issues, capitalizing on economic inequality, political disillusionment, and social dislocation. To counter its rise, we must confront these underlying issues. It's about safeguarding our shared values of diversity, tolerance, and mutual respect, and protecting the democratic institutions that guarantee our freedom and rights. But there's a vast chasm between civil political discourse and extremist ideologies that incite violence, propagate hate, and undermine democracy. It's high time that we all take responsibility and play our part in this fight. We can, for instance, challenge extremist views in our communities, promote tolerance, invest in education and social policies that counteract the root causes of extremism, that uphold the rule of law, safeguard democratic institutions, and collaborate globally to tackle this worldwide threat. As we take on right-wing extremism, let's remember that we are not just countering a destructive ideology. We are also building a positive vision for our future. A vision of societies that are inclusive, diverse, and resilient. A vision of politics that is respectful, fair, and democratic. A vision of politics that is respectful, equitable, and democratic, even more so than we've encountered before. The dangers, friends, are real, but so too is our capacity to confront them. There is hope in the realization that our ability to discern and resist manipulation is as intrinsic to our humanity as our susceptibility. So, friends, I ask you, let's challenge the politics of hate. Let's push back against manipulation and propaganda. And let's work towards societies that are informed, inclusive, and resilient. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Our strength lies in our diversity, unity, and shared humanity. We must champion media literacy, critical thinking, support responsible journalism, and ensure that the digital world is not a breeding ground for misinformation. We must promote dialogue over division, understanding over fear, and empathy over hostility. We must utterly demand transparency and accountability from our leaders and media. I ask you once again, let's unite against the politics of hate and work towards informed, inclusive, resilient societies. I want a society where we replace fear and division with understanding and unity. Celebrating diversity of thought, where truth triumphs over deception and love conquers hate. Frankly, the future of our democracy, our society, and indeed our planet absolutely depends on it. That is the final word up front, and I'm Sean Sainhart. This is Coup Save America. It's been, again, as I said before, it's been a few weeks since we've aired a new episode, and on topic today, I have an extraordinary guest. I'm so pleased to have him. David Shaw, the author of Deplorable Politics, Propaganda for the Brainwashed. And he's going to join us right after the break. And again, please tune into this episode. If you've got friends that are nearby, grab them, pull them in. This is a conversation that this country needs to have more than ever before. And you know, sadly, I do worry about the level of propaganda that we are inundated with nonstop. It's in the mainstream news. It pervades our society, and it especially has found a breeding ground on social media. And I think the key step to confronting this is to, first off, be able to recognize messages that are legitimate and narratives that are manufactured. And we also have to understand that it's not just one party per se that's engaged in propaganda. Both parties do, in fact, engage in such tactics. It's the way it's used to promote hate, to incite violence, to incite fear, to marginalize members of our communities. This, my friends, is the destructive force in this country that we must confront. And David Shaw is going to help us understand that right after the break. We'll be right back.
Coup Save America. Coup Save America. Podcast you need every week. What you want to do for latest news and understand economy and politics. Basic
welcome back. I now would like to introduce my guest, David Shaw, to the program. David, how are you today?
Great, Sean.
I am so thrilled to have you. Now, I just received, now your book is not out yet. It's available for pre-order on Amazon. The date is, I think, the 15th of next month. Is that correct?
Actually, June 15th of this month.
This month.
July 15th, my book is going to be available for a great price because I want to get high visibility on Amazon. So my Kindle ebook will be 99 cents instead of $9, and my paperback will be $14.50 instead of $20. So people can go to my website, and if they sign up on my blog, they will be notified when that book is available for a discount price. And I'd love to offer that price to all of your audience.
Oh, well, thank you. And I want to stress again to my audience the importance of this book, because this is really, I mean, there are issues, climate change, socioeconomic inequality, but we are not going to counter anything until we first tackle the problem of propaganda and the politics of hate. And so I implore you, go sign up on his blog, David's blog, and get this book. Now, unfortunately, I have to admit, I just received the book over the weekend, and I have not been able to finish it. So I, instead of trying to read it from start to finish, I kind of skimmed through it a bit. So it's a little bit fractured in my mind, but it's wonderfully written. And as a sociologist, I absolutely love the sociological aspects that you dive into. And now you're a political scientist yourself, so you have a lot of experience and knowledge in this area.
Yes, I have a bachelor's degree in political science and a master's degree in psychotherapy.
Oh, okay, wow. So yeah, you definitely understand the way this impacts. I've been a fundraising consultant until I retired about a year ago, and I was a fundraising consultant for nonprofit organizations that provide healthcare, mental health services, and a wide variety of social services. And a lot of my writing and proposals, I would have to actually do large literature reviews in sociological issues, and it's always been something that I've been interested in. And I've written I started out writing a lot of essays that I published on my WordPress and also on Facebook. And then one day I got the idea, all of these things that I've written, I could actually compile them into a book. And I thought that would be a pretty simple process, but I had a rude awakening. It was an incredibly challenging process. Yes, believe me, I know.
And now the marketing and advertising is another incredibly challenging process.
Yeah, it really is. I don't think people understand. I'm a writer myself, and I can attest to I'm a screenwriter. I've attempted to write, but writing a book is really one of the most challenging things I think you can do, because you have to. It's hard to get your thoughts out, and I'm a very meticulous writer. I like to use a lot of flowery words and make every word sort of have an impact, and so it takes a lot longer for that. For me, at least. So writing a book such as you have, I can't even imagine the tackling something of that nature, but I'm certainly glad that you did. Now, I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask anyhow. What inspired you to write this particular book?
Well, I've been a writer for all of my life. And until about a year and a half ago, I always wrote what I was paid to write, proposals.
Yeah.
And then when I retired, this is like, as far as I'm concerned, the last thing on my bucket list that I wanted to accomplish. And so I finally got it done.
Well, it's certainly.
Hello.
Hi, yeah. It's certainly interesting that you've been writing these essays all of this time, which really kind of shows the depth of the problem that we're encountering. This is not something that just sort of emerged out of the blue with Donald Trump. I mean, this has been something that's been ongoing for quite some time.
Yes, I make that book pretty clear in my, and that's pretty clear in my book. And Sean, before we go any further, I just want to say something about your monologue. I wished I would have heard that monologue before I wrote the book, because you said so many things that are the issues that I address. And a lot of times you were more articulate than I. And, if people want to know what my book is about, that monologue pretty much sums it up. I think you covered all the points. The only one thing that I did add in my book is a psychological perspective and answering the question, why is it that some people are so accepting of propaganda and other people see right through it and reject it? What's a psychological profile of people? What's their character like, and what influence, how did they acquire that character that makes them susceptible to propaganda? So towards the end, I'd like to discuss that in detail towards the end. I think we need to kind of set the stage in terms of the information that you provided first.
Well, one of the things I want to ask you, and this is kind of relevant to that topic, and we might as well just get the elephant in the room out of the way, Donald Trump. I cannot understand. I mean, we have seen this right-wing extremism. Really, it started, I think, with the Tea Party more than anything, although it started a little bit before that.
Yes.
What we have not seen right now, Donald Trump.
I marked the start. I marked the start of it with Ronald Reagan and his emphasis in his campaign on family values.
Yes.
So public policy issues really took a back seat, and family values was, the new issue to discuss.
Yeah, and we're seeing that even still today, where everything is being perverted around family values. I mean, that's the crusade against the transgender community, the LGBT community. We're seeing a resurgence in racism. But what we haven't seen, I mean, there was fanfare for Ronald Reagan. That's absolutely for sure. Donald Trump is being indicted right now today. And what we haven't seen before, I mean, when you look at the protests that are lining up outside the courtroom with people all dressed in different attire and costumes and supporting Donald Trump, this is like a cult-like behavior that I don't think that we've seen before. And I don't understand. I don't understand any of it. It's very confusing to me how this man could have crystallized this level of support. Clearly, truth has gone out the window. How did we get to this point with Donald Trump? I don't understand.
I have something that I kind of really changed what I wanted to say in the order that I wanted to say it after I heard your monologue. And one of the things that you mentioned was the steps that are involved in promoting propaganda. And I want to, it's very short, but I want to read from my book those exact steps, but apply them to a real situation.
Please.
And so now I'm going to read one of these, and then maybe we can discuss it, or maybe you just like to hear the whole 4 steps, and then we can discuss them all. So
sure.
This narrative is about how is it that thousands of people came to the Capitol and engaged in a violent insurrection. How did propaganda make that happen? And here are the steps which you provided generically, and I'm going to provide it to the specific case. So the first step is to make a claim that will incite anger in your followers. It does not have to be true, only remotely plausible. the more exaggerated the claim, the better. That's step one. Step two is repeat the claim and continue exaggerating it loudly until the news media is tired of refuting the propaganda and merely refers to Trump as angry because he lost. And then step three is act as if the claim is a fact. File as many lawsuits as possible claiming the election was stolen by corrupt Democrats. Lie about evidence that does not exist to bolster your phony claim. And fourth, tell your followers they must fight like hell to stop the steal, or they won't have a country anymore. So if you're wondering how propaganda works and how it's effective, I think those steps pretty much illustrate it, and it's repeated over and over in all kinds. That's one propaganda campaign. There's many, many propaganda campaigns, but they basically follow the same game plan.
Yeah, and what's so different? I understand all of that. What I still have a hard time grappling with is just how evident the lies are. I mean, if you look at Donald Trump's character, right? I mean, the fact that he has an evangelical following is a mystery to me. I mean, I think that they have their own agenda, and they saw Trump as a tool for achieving that agenda. But even still, they support him. A man who's been divorced, a man who's been with porn stars. Nothing wrong with all of that, right? It's very hypocritical to the values that he's representing. And so are these people?
First of all, evangelicals, they put their fate in the hands of God. They think that God is going to bless them and help them solve their problems. So it's not a big step for them to transfer that faith into God into the faith in a charismatic leader like Donald Trump. And once they do that, then they accept that if you lie and it is a means to achieve your purpose or your end and to gain power and influence, in that case, lying is acceptable.
Yeah, it just, again, it's very hypocritical. I mean, there were so many times during Trump's presidency when I'm like, okay, he's gone too far. He's lost him. I mean, like the whole incident with him signing Bibles. I thought, oh my goodness, that's it. He's done. Nope. I mean, it really does seem as though that there's nothing that this man can do that's going to risk his base. I think that I really don't know what else we can do at this point.
Well, when you talk about his base is more influenced by belief than by fact. So they believe that Donald Trump is the person that can solve all their problems because Donald Trump told them that. He says, I'm the only one that can do it. And that's because they accept belief over fact, then it's very easy to manipulate what that you want them to do.
It seems to me too that part of the problem, and I'm going to address this towards both parties because both parties have failed in this respect, I think, is the susceptibility to this propaganda campaign is especially virulent in situations where you have growing socioeconomic inequality. Poverty, for instance, you've got people that have lost their jobs and they're looking for a scapegoat. And they're also looking for a hero, right? They're looking for somebody who's going to say, you know what, the system is in fact rigged and I know how it works and I can fix it. Sort of what Donald Trump, like you just alluded to, where he says, I alone can fix it. And it seems to me as though unless we fix those underlying issues, we're kind of screwed in that sense. But at the same time, how do we confront those socioeconomic issues while we have this threat of propaganda? And I mean, I think that we're going to see a lot more violence in the wake of Donald Trump's indictment. I truly do, and that scares the hell out of me. But he's already called for violence. I mean, there are people on social media calling for civil war over this. I mean, and part of the blame too falls, I think, in the mainstream media.
Well, I think the biggest part, without the mainstream media, this wouldn't happen.
Right.
That's when mainstream media uses propaganda terms in their headlines. We're already susceptible to the message. So when you see a headline and it has the word "stop the steal" or parental rights or critical race theory, those terms didn't just spontaneously happen. They were calculated to promote propaganda and to divert attention away from the real issue. And so, one of the things I say often is we invented this new term called fact check. Well,
Yeah.
What's fact check? Fact check is, are they lying or not? But you read all the fact check and they have a Pinocchio nose. They won't call people lie. When people lie, they don't say they're a liar. They don't say they're lying. And so the real impact, the real deplorable messaging is really not recognized.
No, absolutely. And along the same lines, and I want people to understand this, whether it's Fox News or MSNBC or CNN, they are driven by profit and ratings. And I believe it was the head of Time Warner, the head of CNN at one point, who said during Trump's campaign, Trump may be bad for America, but he's great for CNN. And that's why they devoted so much airtime to him. I mean, they elevated him above anything else. And they I mean, they really, I think, poured, fuel on the fire here. And then Fox News and these other right-wing news organizations just went right off the deep end and carried with it. And so all of this has benefited Trump, and it's been detrimental to our society. And you have to wonder if CNN and all of these people, I mean, they would actually air hours of his empty podium waiting for him to show up during the first election cycle.
Yeah.
I mean, this ratings-driven, profit-driven media, it seems to me, is not journalism at all. It's infotainment, if you even want to call it information.
Exactly. Yeah. I spent a lot of time and a lot of pages talking about how news media is more for entertainment and creating shock value as opposed to a straight reporting of the news. And I want to give my favorite example of that. And everybody who read my book before publication and gave me feedback, they told me, don't put that in the book because nobody agrees with you. And I said, no, I'm putting it in there because it's really important for people to understand. And so that issue is exploring space and going to Mars. And when you ask a person about Mars, you get the response, well, it's important to gain knowledge or to explore our horizons, or if we understand Mars climate, we can better understand our climate. And I basically debunk all of those claims. I actually spent a lot of time searching. There's got to be a good reason for exploring Mars. I spent a lot of time reading a lot of articles, a lot of informed scientific, really not scientific, they're about engineering, but I spent a lot of time researching that, and I found nothing. And so the reason that news media does cover exploring Mars is because it's great entertainment, and they present it that way. When when the Mars lander was getting ready to land, they broadcast a artist depiction of what that landing is like, because that depiction is so much colorful and has such better impact than the actual landing, which they really don't care about. They just care about the entertainment aspect. So, that's just one example of how the news just covers something incessantly that is really not important. And I spend a lot of time in my book saying, what do you want to do? Do you want to spend billions of dollars exploring Mars for reasons that I don't understand? Or would you rather take that money and invest it in transition to the new hydrogen economy, or however we're going to fight global warming?
If we fight it.
So, it just shows that the news media, they don't have their priorities right.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned the simulation of Mars, because they do the same thing with war games. I mean, they sell war, which is not surprising considering that most of them are owned by the military-industrial complex. I don't think people realize the connection between that complex and the mainstream media. But they glamorize war. I mean, they did this whole, I think it was CNN, don't quote me on that, but I believe it was CNN that did this whole war game scenario about war with China. What could happen? Who's going to win? And I was like, what are you doing? What are you doing? We don't need to glamorize this war. We don't need to. I mean, this is not the way to achieving progress in this world. So it's, and again, they love those simulations. Their entire sets now. I mean, CNN, I mean, they've got these holographic things. I mean, it really is, like you said, it's entertainment. It's produced entertainment with a little bit of facts occasionally sprinkled in.
Yeah, and the one thing before I get off the Mars thing that I wanted to mention is we want to send a manned mission to Mars. And so I'm waiting for somebody to tell me, what is it that a man can do on Mars, which is way more expensive than sending a robot? What is it a man can do on Mars that a robot cannot do?
Well, don't you think that part of it is trying to recapture that? Because again, it seems as though neither party is all that interested in governing toward the issues. I mean, it's so dysfunctional, this system that we have right now.
Yeah.
But part of it is just recapturing, hey, look, we did something. We beat the Russians again to the moon. Do you think a lot of it is just politicians trying to capture that JFK moment?
Well, yeah, they want to capture the JFK moment by accomplishing something we already accomplished. We've been to the moon. And, I think that's about all I want to say on that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the kind of the thing. We've been to the moon, so now we got to go to Mars. We always have to do something extraordinary that seems to, again, that excites people in times of despair.
Yeah.
And
I got a lot of feedback that said I got a lot of feedback that said, we always need to explore new frontiers, like Columbus discovered America. And I point out to them that even Columbus had a business plan. The royalty, the King of Spain didn't send him there for no reason. They were looking to profit from it. Right. Nobody can tell me what the business plan is for going to Mars.
Let me ask you something.
One of my favorite rants.
I agree. I want to ask you something, and somebody on Facebook, it looks like has maybe a question. We hear if you listen to CNN and MSNBC, they'll give you a narrative that, the far right, the Trump supporters, it's just a small group of people, nothing really to worry about. Is that true? I mean,
Well, it might have been, when Hillary Clinton was running for president, she's the one that started this thing about deplorables. And she said, there's a basket full of deplorables, which it implies it's a small group. And in 2020, that basket full of deplorables has grown to 74 million people who should have seen the last 4 years of Trump to know that that was the wrong choice, but they voted for him. So you can start with 74 million people who voted for Trump. You can add to that the people that like him but didn't even go to the polls. You have millions and millions of people that subscribe to Trumpism.
And, the one problem that I had with Hillary Clinton's depiction is that too seems very divisive, to call people deplorable. I agree with deplorable politics and deplorable politicians, but
Yeah.
it did seem as though it stretched too far. I mean, I don't see these people as deplorable. I see them as misguided, misinformed, victims in many sense.
Yeah. She should have said people in power are
Yes.
the culprits. They are the ones that are influencing unsuspecting people and manipulating them. So I try my best in my book to not blame Republicans, but to blame people in Congress, in large corporations. Those are the people that are spreading the propaganda. Those are the ones that are poisoning our messaging in the news and social media.
Now, let me ask you a question. So let's say that Fox News makes a claim, obviously false claim, propaganda that's tilted towards Donald Trump. When CNN and MSNBC cover those stories, a lot of times it's such insignificant garbage that it doesn't even seem newsworthy to start with. But when MSNBC or CNN, when they rebroadcast these stories, when they confront these issues, are they not also adding legitimacy to them in some sense?
Sure. Yeah. They treat the propaganda narrative as the other side of the story. And they act like, well, we're fair and balanced. We're going to tell you both sides of the story and you decide. But when one side is reality and addressing an issue, and the other side is propaganda filled with misleading information and lies, those are not the two sides of the story. And they minimize the propaganda side. They never call anybody a liar. They don't, accuse people of committing crimes, which in broad daylight we know it's a crime. I like to offer the analogy of O.J. Simpson, which everybody watched on TV. We didn't have to wait for the jury to come out to know the guy is guilty, And so the people say, well, Trump, he deserves his day in court, and I don't know all the facts yet. To me, that's just BS. We know the facts. We know what he did. We know that he committed a crime when he drove all those people to the Capitol to engage in a violent insurrection. We don't have to wait for a trial or a findings or even an indictment. We know that now. We knew all of the deplorable things that he did in terms of violating the emolument clause, trying to bribe Zelensky. We know all of those things without having to have some authority tell us. They're in the news. But a lot of the news, we're going to reserve judgment. We're just going to describe in very generic terms what happened.
And that goes to one of your points earlier, that you keep repeating a lie more and more, and eventually people are going to believe that lie.
Right. And eventually the news quits refuting it.
Right.
And we don't even call it a lie. We don't even call it a lie. We call it a fact check.
Yeah. And the fact checkers is something else. I mean, essentially, it's the mainstream media fact checking themselves more often than not, and they do a horrible job of that.
Yeah.
How are people getting? I believe I read some statistics that people are getting the majority of their news on social media. Is that do you think that there's a disenfranchisement or a disillusionment even now with the mainstream media where people have just decided to tune out?
Well, one of the realities that we have to deal with is that we live in a country where there's freedom of speech. So in terms of limiting propaganda, it's not easy to do because people are free to say whatever they want to say.
Right.
And so I think that because of that, I think news media say, well, they have a right to say it. We're just going to present the other side. We're really not going to challenge it. And I think that social media is the breeding ground for propaganda, but it is basically corporate media that is the most effective in terms of spreading it and normalizing it.
Well, I mean, and I want to make this point too, that social media, when we talk about Facebook or Twitter, I mean, these two are owned by corporations with people that have their own agenda. And, like with Facebook ads, for instance, they're going to sell ad space to whoever has the money to pay for it. And if that ad revenue is coming from a group that's propagating falsehoods, so be it. And oftentimes it's you don't even realize that it's a promoted tweet or a promoted Facebook post. It looks like just something else in your feed, and it's very easy to fall prey to that. I mean, I guess the concern I have is, how do you know at this point what's true and what isn't true when you're consuming news media? I mean, what are some tips that you can advise as to how you can even navigate this chaos?
My book has a list of 50 words and terms that were basically developed and publicized by right-wing professionals, public relations people, political people, editors of magazines, and these words are typically, it's not unusual to see these words in the headlines of stories. And the story may actually shed some light and enlighten people. The problem is, according to the research that I read, is that only 4 out of every 10 people actually read the headline. Actually read the story. They are informed only by the headline. And when the headline has propaganda words in it, they're not going to get an accurate impression of what the story is about. So when you see stop the steal, parental rights, critical race theory, woke, grooming, all of these words are propaganda words.
Yep.
So, if I think that the media could do us a big favor by just being more honest about what the story is about, rather than these words that are purposely designed to mislead.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. And the problem is, again, the profitability. And the news media knows, too. It's not a mystery to them that most people just read the headline and don't bother with the story. Mm-hmm. And yet they persist in doing these, rhetorical headlines that do not inform, that actually misinform and mislead people. And these terms that you're talking about, they're now so pervasive across our society and culture that, the whole discourse of the nation centers around these buzzwords, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what are some of the things let me ask you, because I'm really fascinated by this whole, I'm going to call it victimology of the people that kind of fall trap to this. How long does it take, do you think, for an average person for propaganda to begin working? Is it something that has to kind of build up, or how quickly can someone kind of be consumed by these rhetorical devices? I
don't think there is a a length of time or timeline. If somebody's exposed and goes to Fox News every day, it's not going to take very long at all. If they are not exposed to it, except maybe they hear it in church or somewhere, and they are not a big readers, but they read a headliner every once in a while, then it might take a while. But basically, I think it's important to understand who it is that is influenced by propaganda, and what are the psychological dynamics that allow some people to be influenced by it, and other people see right through it. So that's complete BS. I think the more that a person has a character that, some people are just angry all the time. Some people are, when you talk about politics, they're disillusioned and resentful. And I think the more that people have these kind of emotions and read the news and interpret events around them, the more they have these qualities in the character, the faster it is they're going to be totally committed to making America great again.
Now, one of the things that you have in your book is how Republicans use this propaganda to manipulate people into thinking that Democrats are, like you said, evil, pedophiles, groomers, we want to take away your rights. And that is not implicit. There's an implicity involved in that, where there is an incitement to violence. I mean, you start telling somebody, this group of people over here, they want to take away your rights. They're pedophiles. They're grooming your children. I don't care how subtle you are in that. That is an incitement to violence.
Yes. The biggest one that is so dishonest is that Democrats want to take away your freedom. Exactly what is it? What freedom is it that is so at risk that you need to be afraid that the Democrats want to take it away? During the Reagan administration, there was this guy named Lee Atwater, and he was one time the head of the GOP National Campaign Committee, and he basically said it's not enough to disagree with Democrats on policy. You have to convince your audience that not only do they have the wrong policy, but they are bad people. They are dishonest, and they want to take away your freedom. So, when people finally, people basically say, America is the land of the free, and my freedom is sacred, and I don't want anybody taking it away. Well, nobody's trying to take away your freedom, but you try to convince a right-wing person of that, and they're not going to have any of it. They basically are convinced their freedom is being threatened.
Well, part of it, yes. But underlying that, and I think this is the subtlety that's so nefarious, is that the underlying principle of that really is not so much about freedom, but as much about this illusion of cultural heritage. Like the LGBT, they're ruining your way of life. They're threatening your belief structure, whether that's religious or whatever have you. And so that's where we see, oh, no, this whole LGBT thing, that's pedophiles trying to groom your children. Oh, no, this thing over here, no, that's critical race theory that they're trying to indoctrinate you with. So it's not just freedom that it's this illusion of a time in America's past that never existed that people seem to want to long to return to.
Yeah. And now in Florida, they're making it against the law to actually examine American history. You can't teach people about slavery because it started out that the kindergartners and the first graders are made to feel guilty because they're white. And, I wrote a big thing about, there's professional curriculum people that know the age appropriateness of subject matter. I don't want the right wing to decide what's age appropriate. I think that that's something that professionals do, and they do very well. But that's a curriculum issue. The Republicans don't want to talk about curriculum. They want to talk about the corrupt, evil teachers that's trying to make their kids feel guilty. And, it started out with early education, and now any book in Florida that promotes diversity, it can be banned. They don't care what age it is anymore. It's just like morphed into something larger. And it's not challenged by mainstream media. It's described by mainstream media, but just how nefarious this whole thing is, and how it's led to a national campaign to insert right-wing political ideology into early childhood education. Where did you ever see mainstream media present it in that frame of reference?
No, absolutely. And, and this is the problem with propaganda, is that once that seed is planted, very, very difficult to gain control of it. It sprouts up like weeds and manifests itself in all sorts of different ways in society. And the book ban, and I hate, there's an argument that if you bring up, Nazis, you lose the argument. But I think it's really important to highlight this is exactly the tactics that the Nazis employed to take us, to the Holocaust and to those crimes. And banning books, censoring media, limiting free speech. These are all tactics that have been used throughout history, and the results are always catastrophic.
Yeah. Trump's messaging of "Make America Great Again,"
right?
That's borrowed almost word from word from Hitler after World War II and Germany was destroyed. He campaigned on, "We're going to make Germany great again." The way you make somebody great again is you make somebody else lose.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And is that part of the allure to this too, is the fact that, look, we're not going to fix your economic situation. We're not going to bring jobs back, but we're going to give you somebody to hate and blame.
Yeah. Like, I have a whole thing in my book. I'm not going to quote it, but basically the Republican Party has not had we have a convention every 4 years, and each party, they write down their public policy agenda, what they want to accomplish in the next presidency if their candidate's elected. The Republican Party has not had a public policy platform since 2016. And in 2020, their GOP platform was, "We support everything Trump wants to do." It's in black and white. I don't know if I have the page or not. Do you mind if I read this?
No, please. I want you to read from your book.
This is the 2020 Republican National Committee platform. Resolved that the Republican Party has and will continue to enthusiastically support the President's America First agenda. Resolved that the 2020 Republican National Convention will adjourn without adopting a new platform until 2024. Resolved that the 2020 Republican National Convention calls on the media to engage in accurate and unbiased reporting, especially as it relates to the strong support of the RNC for President Trump and his administration. And the last one, resolved that any motion to amend the 2016 platform or adopt a new platform, including any motion to suspend the procedures that will allow doing so, will be ruled out of order. And Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell was asked to comment on this and what he thinks of what the public policy platform of the GOP campaign convention should be. And he says, that's an excellent question. I'll let you know when we take it back. So, in other words, the whole Republican Party is not interested in any public policy issue. They're only interested in stop the steal, stop the alien invasion, give the rich more tax breaks. Those are, I have even a longer list of all the stuff that they're really interested in. But I really don't want to have to read from my book too much.
Well, no, I definitely, if you want to read from the book, please, because what I've read so far is absolutely fascinating, and I cannot wait to dive deeper into it. And again, what really intrigues me is that you talk about the sociological aspects of propaganda. One thing that you highlight is this whole idea that, with fiscal Republicans, right? They don't exist anymore.
Yeah. Well, the center of the political spectrum is occupied by Democrats, and it used to be occupied by Republicans. The Republicans and Democrats shared the political center. But these days, if there's not many Republicans that are in that center, and those few, and the majority in terms of the political spectrum, they've all moved over to the conservative, and then the ultra right-wing conservative that's so right-wing they don't even deserve to be called Republicans. And the far right wing is basically people who are fascist and Nazis. And that used to be like nobody, but now there's a sizable amount, and a lot of them were in that Capitol insurrection.
Well, and a lot of them are pretty proud and outright insane, as much as, as far as how they identify. I mean, they're not even ashamed of it.
Yeah, well, there was this demonstration in Charlottesville.
Yes.
Where it was the first time that the violent wing of the Republican Party publicly made an announcement, we hate Jews. We are going to empower the white race. This is a Christian nation, and anybody who's not a Christian nation is not a real American. These views were spoken to among the believers. And Charlottesville was the first time says, we don't care if all the public knows about it. We're going to, they used to be separate organizations, but now there's an umbrella that covers all these organizations, and they're proud of their right-wing views, and they want to advertise them to the whole public, which allows them to recruit and influence even more radical people. And so the culmination of that was the Capitol riot.
How do you counter, because going along with this is, like the whole stop the steal, is Donald Trump has, it's funny because Donald Trump portrays himself as this billionaire, right? But yet he's constantly fundraising for, hey, help me fight my legal battles. It's a political witch hunt. And it's just funny that people are giving money to a billionaire for his legal funds. But what do you make of again, this, of all the people, I mean, don't get me wrong, Ron DeSantis is absolutely horrible.
Yeah.
But he's
more dangerous than Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is stupid and DeSantis is smart.
Absolutely.
But their ideologies are the same.
But that's my question. Why do we still see this cult-like mentality around Donald Trump when we have someone like Ron DeSantis, who is far more likely to achieve their objectives?
Because political readers, they don't have beliefs, they don't have principles, they have polls, and polls inform the leaders of what people believe and help them they use the polls to find out what influences them, and then they develop their messaging around that. So it doesn't matter what the facts are. It's just a matter of how do we exploit people's anxiety, fear, anger, resentment. And if you do polls and focus groups, you'll find out what people are afraid of or angry about, and that is how you frame your public policy.
Now, in the light of all of these indictments, one of the, I guess, not so remarkable anymore, is that Donald Trump's level of support seems to increase with all of these indictments. Again,
yeah, we learned a long time ago that people don't care if he was impeached twice. They don't care if he's been indicted twice. And they don't care if he's indicted for the Capitol riots or his crimes committed in trying to steal the election. It's. I just have to repeat the thesis that people are not guided by what the facts are. When they believe, they're guided by their beliefs, and when they have 100% belief in their charismatic cult leader, they're going to choose belief over fact every time.
Is there anything that can be done? I mean, let's again forget the mainstream media, because that's kind of a lost cause. I mean, they're not going to reform themselves until you take money out of politics and you get rid of the corporate influence of the media. But what can we as citizens do to try to counter? I mean, are these people reachable?
Well, yeah, they're reasonable. Believe it or not, a lot of very sound and important public policies are supported by most Republicans.
Right.
Yeah, whether it's Social Security or affordable health care, affordable education, affordable housing. There's a lot of unions, even. Republicans support unions. So I think more needs to be done to try to, instead of viewing all Republicans as the enemy, we need to try to recruit those, which is more, and the Republicans, only 30% of the Republicans are deplorable. So that leaves 70% of the other Republicans that we have an opportunity to appeal to their reason and come up with things that they will support. And there's a lot of liberal policies that Republicans will never support. They're not coming to mind right now, but they're in my book. Yeah, there's a lot of polls that show, in a lot of cases, maybe 45 to 50% of Republicans say they support it. But what if you didn't have the propaganda to influence them? There would be an overwhelming support of Republicans for the issues that, in fact, both Democrats and Republicans agree on. There's things like Republicans are kind of digging themselves in a hole these days. First of all, they lost their best propaganda weapon when abortion was made illegal. That was a great way for propaganda to drive the one issue Republicans to the polls. Now they got to find out another way to do it.
Yeah.
And most Republicans support some form of rational abortion. In my book, I said we should quit saying pro-life and pro-choice. You're either for abortion or you're not. Pro-life is such a misleading thing. An egg and a sperm, they're both alive, but they're not human beings. So we're not talking about life. We're talking about when a fertilized egg becomes a human being. So that means we don't have to outlaw the day after pills, basically a blastocyst is not a fetus and a fetus is not an unborn child. There's still a gray area, but we could eliminate a lot of the rhetoric about early abortion, which is really where the debate should center. Let's see, what was the other thing? Most Americans, Republicans included, if they could have seen or they know about a rational immigration policy that would solve a lot of our immigration problems. And I think I'm not too sure what year it was, but there was actually both support in the House and the Senate on immigration policy that both Republicans and Democrats would support, and Trump stopped it. But most people, the media casted it as something that the left and right is never going to agree on, and that's just simply not true.
No, I agree. And again, both sides, as far as the media, I mean, the left-wing media and the right-wing media, both engage in these tactics that I find very divisive. I mean, it's, don't trust the other party. And so we're not discussing issues. We're not reaching across the lines. If someone identifies as Republican to a leftist, it's like, okay, well, I want nothing to do with you. You're evil, go away.
Yeah.
Of course, Republicans feel the same way towards those on the left. And it's really gotten to a point where you cannot communicate. And we are, I mean, this has been said many, many times. But I think that it's relevant that we are, in fact, I don't foresee a civil war like the civil war that we had in the past. I see it more in terms of just an increase in mass violence, terrorist attacks, things of that nature. But we're certainly heading down a path, I think, where violence becomes inevitable. And the more this propaganda...
I think right now we're at a crossroads.
Yes.
Right now, I think we're at a crossroads. These issues are really becoming to a head, and we're going to, I think in 2024, the debate is going to really be sharply defined, and people are going to have to make a choice between democracy or authoritarianism. That's going to be the choice that I think it's going to come down to, especially after Trump gets indicted 2 more times. I want to say something about a Republican named David Brooks, who has, with Jonathan Capehart, they have a show on public television. And when I got to the end of my book, I started reading about things about how can we affect change and how can we develop consensus. And he pointed out a time in the 60s where there was a major cultural change. And he pointed out that it started out with the beatniks in New York, and then it spread to the college campuses, and we had hippies, and eventually it spread to the whole population. And the idea of Christian nationalism took a back seat. A Christian, we're not a Christian nation. We're not governed by the rules of the Bible. During the 60s, people really rejected that. And instead of embracing conformity in the 50s, conformity and respect your elders was a great thing. In the 60s, it became youth was a great thing, and nonconformity was a great thing. So the point he made was there's opportunity and a process where meaningful change can have a seismic shift in society. And so we just need to, I think, keep appealing to reason. Don't participate in don't exchange in the hateful, spiteful language that Republicans, they want that conversation all the time. And to keep, we have reason and truth on our side, and we need to just stick to that and try to convert as many people as possible. And I have a website. It's called deplorablepolitics.org, and I want to use it to continue my narrative. The one big problem I had about this book is when to quit writing, because every time I think I finished the book, something new would come along, and I go, that should be in my book. And I finally had to say no. And so I just want to mention one thing that illustrates that. And that was when the Chinese spy balloon was first in the news. The first day when it crossed from Canada into the United States, there were headlines by every news organization. And the honest headline said a Chinese balloon. And then the slightly biased headlines was suspected spy balloon. And then there was Fox News, they just said spy balloon. So there's a lot of difference between a weather balloon, a suspected balloon, and outright spy balloon. And I just thought that was a very simple and easy to understand demonstration of how different organizations use their headlines to try to be objective or try to promote propaganda and anger. But after that, I said, I got to finish this book.
Are you amazed at how pervasive propaganda has become in the last 8 years?
Yes, I can remember when the first Bush was running against in the first presidential campaign when Bush Sr. was running. He was running against I forgot, but anyway, back then, I remember thinking, this is really not that important because the Republicans and Democrats, as far as I can see, are basically saying the same thing. And I thought, well, it's a little important about which political policy it was. But today, democracy is at risk. The differences are so wide that we're looking at a choice, like I said, between democracy or authoritarianism.
Yeah, on that note, and I want to ask you, one of my problems is that it does not seem as though we have a lot of Democrats, and when I say Democrats and Republicans, I'm talking about the people in power, not the average citizen.
Exactly.
A lot of Democrats in power seem to be adhering to this neoliberal ideology that kind of continued Reaganomics. And it doesn't seem as though they are addressing the root causes of inequality, these issues that we see very pervasive in society. How much of that do you think is contributing to, because again, you've got that underlying despair that people are sharing, and it's making people more susceptible, I think, to propaganda. Do you think at this point, with democracy being as fragile as it is right now, that it's even savable?
I think democracy is at risk as long as there's money in politics.
Yeah.
Democrats will not be effective advocates as long as they're taking big contributions from oil and everybody else. I think Citizens United was really a turning point in our country, where money does not just corrupt Republicans, it corrupts Democrats too.
Yeah, and that's exactly where we are at this point. We've got
And you never hear a Democrat campaign on the issue. We got to get money out of politics. Citizens United needs to be overturned. You got 3 or 4 Democrats in Congress that'll say that, and that's about it. Bernie Sanders and
AOC, I think, is one of them.
Ocasio.
Yeah.
Yeah, AOC is a lot better easy to say. And yeah, Elizabeth Warren, there's like 4 or 5 of them, and that's it. The rest of them are gonna hold back on how they really feel because they want those political contributions.
Yeah, and I feel that is a huge problem.
Yeah, it's a major barrier of Democrats really being effective advocates for what they really believe in.
Yeah, and the other thing too is, Joe Biden's re-election campaign video. It didn't talk about the issues. Again, it talked about the threat of the Republicans. These MAGA Republicans are going to grab hold of power.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that's just as divisive as what Republicans are doing. I mean, we need to be reaching out to these people, not castigating them and further pushing them to the margins. And it just seems as though both parties now are using these fear tactics as their sole electoral advantage. And no one's really talking about the societal issues that really matter and how we can solve these issues.
That's right. Yeah. Global warming is the issue that more than any issue in the history of civilization is going to affect the whole planet. But you don't hear it talked about in those terms. And so, you wonder how bad it has to get before people really start to panic about what's coming in the future. And I think Democrats say, "Oh yeah, I'm against. I'm also all for supporting environmental legislation that's going to help us combat global warming," but they really don't do anything about it. And I like to just take a minute to talk about how propaganda has really distorted the issue of global warming.
Yes, please.
I don't know how many years ago, it's 20, maybe 30, 35 years ago, scientists started publicizing research that said global warming is a threat to our entire planet. And Republicans didn't want to hear that because that's anti-oil. Global warming was a term they did not want to be in the media. So they hired this guy, Frank Lutz. And
Yes.
He conducted a lot of focus groups to find out a word that wouldn't sound so ominous that could replace global warming. And that focus group came up with the term climate change. So, climate change means, hey, the climate changes every day. What's the big deal? They could at least come up with maybe like climate disruption or climate catastrophe, but no, it's just climate change. And even the environmental groups, and then, the whole Republican talking machine and all of the news media, They never said global warming anymore. They all said climate change. Even advocates like environmental groups, they use the word climate change, and you can't talk them out of it. It just shows the power and influence that when these propaganda terms get implanted in our lexicon, it's just impossible it's very difficult to change that.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I'm guilty of that too, using climate change all the time, because it's become so mainstream instead of global warming. And you mentioned Frank Lutz. Propaganda really took off. The Nazis certainly perfected it, but it was in America, the tobacco companies, that effectively waged a war on science and fact. And that's
I have a whole chapter on. I have a chapter called "Cigarette Propaganda."
Can you talk a little bit about that?
They romanticized smoking cigarettes. They offered health benefits from smoking cigarettes. They came up with images like the Marlboro Man and glorified, that kind of a personality, and associated it with smoking cigarettes. And the guy that started that, I think his last name was Bernays, he is now considered the father of modern public relations.
Yes. And for my audience too, I want them to understand public relations actually means propaganda. It came from propaganda. They changed propaganda to public relations, and a lot of people don't realize that. And that's another example of a word that's become so mainstream now. Oh, I'm in public relations, and we interpret that to something completely different. And this is and in addition to what you're talking about, what the tobacco companies did, they also found ways to attack science, largely through using money as a weapon. But they've been able to adapt that now to climate change. And it's amazing. This is another thing. Republicans, a large majority of them, do not believe in global warming. I'm gonna say you got me. I'm gonna do it. Global warming. They just don't believe in it. They believe it's a big hoax.
The evidence is now getting to be so overwhelming, and people are experiencing the actual reality of global warming, that Republicans are starting to change their narrative. And the new narrative is, if you look at the science, and this is true, global warming is irreversible. So we wouldn't, if you waste money on trying to combat global warming, you're just pissing it down the drain, because it's too late to do anything about it.
Well, and I have to say that there's truth to that. I mean, I think that we have passed a threshold that, there's going to be catastrophic consequences from this already. But I still think that it's worth investing in doing something, trying to combat and minimizing the risk.
Definitely. I don't think we're going to have a lot of negative effects, but the thing is, the solution to stopping global warming, it's not a mystery. We know how to do it. I've read a little bit about it, and I think it's what's going to happen. It's what's called the hydrogen economy. Hydrogen is the most environmental friendly source of energy that there is. And, we got some hydrogen cars on the road. California actually developed a hydrogen stations infrastructure where you could actually go from north to south and refuel your car on hydrogen. And a lot of manufacturing facilities are using hydrogen technology. So it's not something that can't be achieved. And my big argument is, let's take all the money, except maybe if we're going to waste money on going to Mars, let Elon Musk piss away his money. We don't need to spend the tax money on that. Let's take all that tax money and put it into solving the global warming issue.
I want to bring up because before we end, I want to go back to what you said at the beginning, where you want to talk about sort of the psychological aspects of that. So before we jump into that, I want to sort of posit a question to you. Now, when COVID, I think, was another turning point where there was a lot of misinformation. And again, this wasn't intentional. I think this is just, I mean, we had a pandemic that emerged, information was scarce, but because of that misinformation, the back and forth, like, don't wear masks. Oh, no, now it's wear masks. Has that even worsened the problem of propaganda and disinformation, where people now have just completely like let go and like, I just don't know what to trust anymore, and I just don't care?
COVID is a perfect example of the false don't limit my freedom messaging of Republicans. They've said, if I have to wear a mask, you're limiting my freedom. If I have to get a vaccine, you're limiting my freedom. Which basically they're saying is I should be free to infect other people. That's the freedom that they have, to infect other people. What was I going to say? In terms of how effective was this anti-freedom narrative? Just about every developed country did better than we in terms of deaths per capita, in spite of the fact we had the first vaccines, the best early treatment, the best hospital care. We had the best of all of it, and yet Canada, India, just about every developed country had not a little bit better success in preventing deaths than us, but like twice as successful as us. I had the statistics in my book, but I don't want to. First of all, I don't know if I could find them right away, and second of all, I don't want to bore you with numbers.
So let's move into the fascinating subject for me, and that's the psychological aspects. Can you kind of take that away for us?
Yeah, let me try. The major contribution of Freud was establishing the reality that early childhood trauma affects your adult character. And so people, and not only in childhood trauma, I'm talking about, child abuse, alcoholism, but also just the trauma of being poor,
Yes.
and not having enough food on the table, those affect the kind of an adult you are. If you look at all the mass murderers, serial killers, they all had very traumatic childhoods.
Yes.
So when you look at the character of people that have been affected by serious childhood trauma, you find that in their character they have a lot of anger. They have a lot of anxiety. They have feelings of guilt. And when you ask the question, who does propaganda influence? It's these people who grew up in a loving, supporting family and had an ideal childhood. They turn out to be loving, supporting people that value community. The other people that experience trauma in their early childhood, they're the ones that really don't understand anything about community. They embrace individualism, that I win when you lose. And so that points to the deeper problem that we have to address, and that can only be addressed one person at a time. You have to change how people think and feel and react one person at a time. So mental health services
Yeah.
and providing a more supportive environment for people that have emotional dysfunctions. That can go a long way towards helping people think in terms of what kind of public policies actually benefit them rather than being influenced in terms of what they should believe.
Are there things that we can do to, when we're talking to people, for instance, are there ways that we can penetrate the propaganda and sort of change the narrative? Are there strategies for doing that?
Well, if we're talking about the individual level, there's things that we can do. We can have more education in terms of improving people's parenting skills. We can have a better response to people that have been arrested,
Right.
and divert them from jail to therapy that works, and we can get the message out that there is help, that people that are experiencing life changing problems in their life, they can find counseling and or treatment. So I think those things need to be a lot higher priority than they are now.
Yeah, we hear this every time there's a mass shooting. Oh, well, this problem is mental health, not guns. Well, I agree. Mental health is a huge part of the problem. The problem is that, neither party seems to be committed to doing a damn thing about providing more mental health. And, you talked about criminalization, or the criminal justice system, and we are now criminalizing youth. I mean, we're now subjecting kids with police in schools to criminal penalties for basically just being, young, for engaging in typical adolescent mischief. And that talk about childhood trauma. I mean, that right there will do it. And we have the facts on this. We have the research. You would think that both parties would be able to kind of come together. And again, when I say parties, I'm talking about the people in power, not necessarily the citizens. And yet nothing is being done. Go ahead.
Yeah, the ultimate pathology is suicide, and
Yes.
basically people that when you look around you, a lot of people that have these beliefs that allow them to support Trump, they seem normal. They don't go around angry all the time. They don't express radical point of view. But when people have these, they suppress those feelings because they're socially not acceptable. It's not socially sanctioned that you go around angry and complaining about your life all the time. So they suppress these feelings, and the more they suppress them, the more they actually feel dead inside. That's the thing that comes out in therapy. That if you have people really confront what's bothering them, before they get to their anger, they get to their feeling of not being able to feel, and they describe it as feeling dead inside. And when somebody feels dead inside, they lose the appreciation of the other people's life, and their anger that they've been suppressing actually starts to flow out of them in terms of picking up a gun and shooting somebody.
Yeah, and the hateful rhetoric. Well, again, it goes back to your life sucks, but rather than us doing something about it, let's show you a scapegoat. Let's say immigrants. Your jobs are gone, not because we sent them over to countries like China where there's child labor and therefore cheaper costs. No. The immigrants stole your jobs. Hate them.
Yeah. And the charismatic leader is the guy that says, I will give you hope. Trust
Right.
me. I'm going to improve your life. I'm going to give you the freedom that you desire. And so, that's the narrative that we need to challenge and try to break that cycle.
Well, no, that I think is one of the things that Trump did most effectively, was that Trump recognized the socioeconomic disparities, and he used that as sort of a cudgel.
Yeah.
And to me, the response to that should come from the Democratic Party was, yeah, Trump is right. We have socioeconomic disparities, and we've got real problems in this country that need to be resolved, and we're going to meet those challenges by doing X, Y, and Z, rather than Trump just making vague promises. But Trump identified a source of pain and promised that he would heal that pain.
Trump talked about pain that people experience, and he's going to help them not feel anxious and not have pain. But Democrats talked about policies, laws, things that are important, but they don't really touch the emotional aspect of it like Trump does. And so that's why Trump is a lot more effective.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, just what
That's
you're
why
saying.
Trump is a lot more.
I mean,
Yeah.
he goes to these rallies, right? He does these rallies, and Trump will go to a place that most presidential candidates or presidents will not go to, these small towns. He goes there. He says, you know what? You matter to me. Look, I showed up. I'm here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, he goes to the small towns and he complains about the big city elite liberals who want to take away your freedom. A lot of people really don't understand how serious this issue is. And one thing that drives it home to me, and I encourage everybody to do this, the last Trump rally, that speech is a good one. Go on YouTube, watch that speech from beginning to end. The news media covers the highlights,
right.
but the highlights don't come near to showing how dangerous and how hateful Trump is. If you watch the whole, even especially fair-minded Republicans, if they watched that speech, they would start to understand, we have to do more to condemn this right-wing fascist propaganda.
Don't you think, though, that would have happened by now?
I would have thought it would, but it didn't. But I still think that we're headed for a crossroads where we're either going to go down we're going to build enough support to continue to make our democracy thrive, or we're going to go spiral down into deplorable politics, and our government is going to be authoritarian instead of democratic. I think that that issue is just going to be more, there's going to be more clarity as the closer that we get to the election, that is really the issue. It's not going to be about what's the best border policy or tax policies or any other thing except this really core decision that our politics have to resolve.
Do you get the sense, because again, and I don't give a lot of credence to polls, especially this early before the election, but there are polls showing Trump beating Joe Biden.
Yeah.
What can Democrats do at this point to counter this narrative?
I don't know. I think there's not much to do about that. Like I said, if you watch Trump's speech where he just pillories Biden to the point of absurdity and ridiculousness, you would understand that it's just a bunch of lies and BS. And so I don't think there's a lot that we can do in terms of giving evidence that Biden really has integrity and that he's an honest and sincere person. I don't think what we have. I don't think that's really effective. What I think is more effective is being able to debunk all of the lies and propaganda that's being spewed by the right. I think in terms of this next election, I said that money corrupts. And already we see the big money saying, we got to get off the Trump bandwagon before it's too late. So because Trump's he's going to lose the donations from the corporations and the rich because they're going to increasingly see him as a loser. And, they understand the reality that he's dangerous. I think the big corporate money know that he's dangerous and they don't need to get elected. And so then still the question is, are we going to have the Trump substitute, and is the big money going to go behind DeSantis or somebody else? But it still gets down to, which road are we going to travel?
Who do you think is more? I mean, I would say that Ron DeSantis is far more dangerous than Donald Trump. Would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah. Well, they have the same political. Ron DeSantis has zero political beliefs. He just puts his finger up and see how the wind's blowing, and what he can do to rally right now what he's doing is recruiting Trump's base. So he'll say the most radical right-wing thing to say, I'm just as good as Trump, except I'm smart and he's stupid.
Well, part of the problem with these indictments is, and it's almost laughable if it wasn't so tragic, but it's, I believe it was Ron DeSantis when he wanted to make his announcement. He ended up having to defend Trump because he's catering to that base. And so he has to go out there and say, this indictment's a political witch hunt. And it just, again, it saps up all the energy and puts all the focus on Trump. And now you've got Trump's, opposition, his, candidates running against him, now having to come out to support him just to cater to that base.
Yeah, they have the Republican candidates for president, they have to support Trump because they have to support these narratives of a deep state. The DOJ is weaponizing justice. The FBI should be defunded. These are important issues to activate the base. And so they can't do that without having at least some level of endorsement of Trump.
Yeah, and it's really, it really kind of defies the whole game of politics, really, when you think of it. Because, you're supposed to not be supporting a candidate or another candidate. You're supposed to be like, hey, this is how I differentiate myself from them. And, you would think, a part of me thought, Ron DeSantis or someone like that would capitalize on these indictments. And it would say, look at this. This guy has committed a crime.
He would alienate a lot of the Trump's base if he did that. He didn't. He's going to shift it. So if he gets the nomination, he's going to be Mr. Middle of the Road. You can count on it.
Yeah.
He'll change all of his messaging once the base is. He's got the base transferred from Trump to DeSantis. That's what he's trying to do now, is get the base transferred from Trump to DeSantis. When he achieves that, he's going to be a whole different new messaging.
Do you think he's going to achieve that?
Yes. I think that with big money going to abandon Trump, with just a steady drumbeat of negativity, this indictment, the next indictment, the indictment after that, all of that, I think, is just going to erode Trump's support. And I think that eventually there'll be a movement to support DeSantis.
Yeah, and that again leads us down to an even more dangerous path, unfortunately.
Yeah, you know, I like to say that I would love to see Trump get the nomination, because there's not a snowball's chance in hell he could ever be reelected, because so many people hate him. Not only do all Democrats hate him, but at least a huge percentage of Republicans hate him too and understand that he's dangerous. So it would be a slam dunk to beat him in a presidential race. The only problem is that's such a high risk strategy. I mean, I don't even want the remotest possibility that there's something or some way he could actually win that election. He's just too dangerous to want for anybody to wish that he had the nomination.
Well, on that same token, I mean, I would rather it be him than Ron DeSantis, because I really genuinely think that Ron DeSantis could push through an agenda that Donald Trump is just not capable of pursuing.
No doubt about it.
So, I mean, you know, it's really sort of a no-win situation, but I mean, I kind of would hope that Donald Trump would be the nominee. And as far as him beating Joe Biden, I mean, there are polls showing that he does in fact beat Joe Biden. And again, I don't want to give a lot of credence to these polls, but I think that Biden needs to fundamentally shift. I frankly think Biden is the wrong nominee. I think we need.
Oh, no doubt about it. We need youth.
Yeah,
we need vision. We need progressive. You know.
Yes.
Biden, I think he's doing a great job, but you know, at some point it's time to turn the mantle over to somebody else, and now's that time. But it's not going to happen. And in terms of Trump being the nominee, like I said, he could easily be beaten, but he's just too far dangerous for us to take that chance.
Right, great. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us, and I wanted to remind the audience the book is Deplorable Politics, Propaganda for the Brainwashed. I'm enjoying it. It's a great book. It's got a lot of detail, a lot of information. It's got a very convenient dictionary in the book that outlines all of the different terms, propaganda terms, some of which we discussed, like critical race theory and things of that nature. And I want to give the last word to you, David. And again, your website is deplorablepolitics.com, correct?
No, .org.
.org. I'm sorry, .org. And
the easy way to find me is just put Deplorable Politics Shaw, SHAW, in your search box. You'll see Barnes and Noble and Amazon, and you'll see this.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. And I love the book cover, by the way, too.
You know, this artwork, that's the work of Carl Jung.
Is it really?
Famous psychologist. Yes, a psychoanalyst. And he and so the inside front cover has a little story about the whole image. I saw that and I go, yeah, that's what I want on my book.
Oh wow! I have to go back and I like I said, I since I just got the book kind of late, I just kind of skimmed it, so I didn't see that part. But now I got to go back and read that because that's fascinating.
It's the first page when you open the book. The first page when you open back the cover.
Perfect.
So
thank you so much again for being on the show.
Okay, and like I say, I'm super impressed by your monologue. You know, I was so happy to hear somebody who actually articulates 90% of what's in my book. And
well, I hope I didn't get too much too
What?
much detail. I want people to read the book.
Yeah,
I think it's the book for our time, and again, please just read the book. And you have a special offer. Again, I want to repeat that offer that you made at the beginning of the show.
July 15th. I would like to give the people the author on on June 15th when my book is released, and you can buy it then. And then in part of this complicated marketing advertising thing that I have to do, in order to offer the book for 99 cents, I subscribe to Amazon Unlimited. And so they have this rule that if you want to offer your book for 99 cents, you need to have it published for a month. So everything got pushed back a month. And that's why it's July 15th instead of June 15th.
July 15th. Okay. Well, again, please read the book. Read the book. Read the book. It is that important. And David, thank you. It's been a wonderful time with you chatting. And hopefully you'll come back at some point. And hopefully, hopefully we can find a light to follow out of this darkness. It's not looking very hopeful at the moment, but books like yours is absolutely essential in finding that light and navigating that path. And I want to thank you for writing the book. I'm looking forward to finishing it. And I'm so blessed. I want to just, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. I was so delighted when you agreed to come on. And I think this has been a fascinating conversation.
And I want to thank you. This is the first time I've ever done anything like this. This is the first time I've actually really talked about my book in detail. And so I was a little anxious about how this would turn out. And, I'm really happy with the way that it turned out. And you're just a fantastic host, and I really appreciate your support.
Well, thank you. And we're off next week, but we'll be back after that with the Reverend Barry W. Lynn. This has been Coup Save America. Thank you so much for tuning in. Citizens.am.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye now.
Thank you for being, and welcome to the Pineal Podcast. I'm Josh, and I know that I know nothing. So I created